All right. Hello. So, my name is Sativa. Today, I want to do a little bit of a crappy PowerPoint on why Russia is much weaker than the West. I don't really feel like this needs too much of an explanation, but I'm still going to do it because I know some people um, um, who think Russia stands a chance against us, and I just want to do a quick video on why they really don't. All right, so let's get into it. So, a quick introduction. The global balance of power has long been shaped by the rivalry between Russia and Western nations, particularly the United States and its allies in NATO. While Russia is often portrayed as a formidable adversary, a closer examination reveals significant weakness compared to the collective strength of the West. These weaknesses are evident in several critical areas, including economic power, military capabilities, technological advancement, and geopolitical influence. This paper explores why Russia is weaker than the West by analyzing these key factors. All right, so the first one is economic power. One of the most significant indicators of a nation's strength is its economic power. The combined GDP of Western nations far surpasses that of Russia. The United States alone has a GDP of approximately 26.9 trillion, while Russia's GDP stands at around 2.2 trillion. Less than a tenth of the US economy, this vast economic disparity limits Russia's ability to invest in its military, technology, and global influence. Moreover, Russia's economy is heavily dependent on natural resources, particularly oil and gas. This dependence makes Russia vulnerable to fluctuations in global energy prices and international sanctions. Western nations, on the other hand, have more diversified economies that are less susceptible to such shocks. These economic sanctions imposed by the West in response to Russia's actions, such as the annexation of Crimea, further weakened the Russian economy, restricting its access to international markets and technologies. Um, I used a couple pictures here in a background thing that I think is stuff that I think about is like the West combined. Like there's a lot of mining. The United States does a lot of oil drilling off of its own, even through economic partnerships and ties. Even countries that aren't necessarily aligned with the United States, like let's say a country like China, who's kind of Russia allied. Even China's biggest trade partner is the United States. So China is never really going to do anything against the US because they would be broke. All right, on to the next one. Military capabilities. While Russia has a significant military force, it pales in comparison to the combined military power of the West. The United States alone has the largest military budget in the world, spending over 800 billion annually, while Russia's defense budget is around 65 billion. This difference in spending translates into a gap in technological sophistication, equipment quality, and overall military readiness. The Western nations also benefit from the collective strength of NATO, an alliance that includes many of the world's most advanced militaries. NATO's combined forces include over 3 million active duty personnel and thousands of advanced aircraft, tanks, and naval vessels. Russia, despite its large number of personnel, struggles with outdated equipment and logistical challenges that limit its ability to project power effectively. Um, yeah, not just that. Just NATO by itself alone. Like the United States by itself has somewhere in the range of like over 1 million active military personnel, and then you can add in the 2 million various NATO members personnel should it come down to an actual showdown with Russia. And it's not just things like that, but just economically speaking, if really the West, which isn't really that geared up to go to war at all, but it only needs to make minor changes. Think of like, because people are shitting on the Germans, but during World War II, a lot of the German car manufacturers also started switching to things like ammunition production and the making of military vehicles. So People always underestimate that, but don't forget about all that mass production that's just sitting there, just being used for civilian things. Should it actually, come down to an actual showdown? Technological superiority. So technological innovation is an area in which oh, whoops. Technological innovation is an area where the West far outpaces Russia. The United States, home to Silicon Valley and many of the world's leading technology companies, leads in areas such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and advanced weaponry. These technologies are critical in modern warfare and global influence. Russia, while it's made advancements in some areas such as hypersonic weapons and cyber capabilities, it lags behind in overall technological development. The country's reliance on older Soviet era technology in many sectors, combined with limited access to cutting edge research and development, hampers its ability to compete with the West in the long term. Yeah, really think about that. Like the internet, most stuff you associate with modern stuff, it's mainly all very American. Um, so obviously they have more of a leading edge in it, but it goes further than that. Like people think microchips for computers and weaponry and all that is made in China, but it's really not. It's made in Taiwan, the European Union, and the United States still. And even if the production facilities for some of these may be in third world countries, usually the stuff to actually make the stuff is sold or at least produced by the West. So like maybe the West isn't producing the microchips themselves, but they're producing all the machines that are necessary to produce said microchips. So there's like a little bit of a caveat in there that people often don't think about, and Russia is just severely lacking behind. If you look at the tanks that they're retrofitting currently to go into service, they're missing very basic things like thermal optics and night vision and like very basic military equipment that pretty much most nations in the world have effectively adopted already. Even countries that are kind of like a little bit dog shit, where you wouldn't expect their soldiers to have it. Like places like think about places like Pakistan and Nigeria. So yeah, geopolitical influence. Geopolitical influence is another area where Russia is weaker than the West. The United States and its allies maintain a vast network of alliances and partnerships around the world. NATO, the European Union, and other alliances give the West a significant advantage in global diplomacy, economic influence, and military presence. Russia, on the other hand, has fewer reliable allies and often finds itself diplomatically isolated on key issues. Its influence is largely regional, concentrated in the former Soviet states and a few countries. The West's ability to form and maintain strong alliances, coupled with its global reach, gives it strategic advantage that Russia cannot match. So a lot of people think just the European Union and the United States in this case, but you can take it a little bit further. To a certain extent, like Japan is a really close ally of the United States, so is South Korea, both very economically important countries in Asia. Australia is also a Western ally sitting there all the way in the south with a really strong economy and also a fairly decent military. Other allies, like in the Middle East, like for instance, think of places like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, both like Turkey more a military power of its own. Saudi Arabia definitely a very large economical power. Also, kind of historically been sort of Western allied countries because they rely on them very much for defense interests. The Saudis, for instance, barely produce any military equipment of their own. They tend to just buy verbatim anything the United States will sell them. And they do buy in bulk. And then you have countries like Jordania, even though militarily maybe less important, still very much NATO allied still. Places like Morocco. Brazil pretends it's not a NATO ally or it really wants to be a friend of BRICS, but really the Brazilians are closer to us than they are to them. And it's the same way with other countries that have like a large population but maybe a weak military. Think places like Mexico, India, and the like. Air power comparison. Air power is a critical component of national security, playing a vital role in both defense and power projection. The United States has long maintained the largest and most advanced air force in the world, outmatching Russia in terms of size, technological sophistication, and global reach. This superiority of air power is evident across various aspects, including the number of aircraft, technological advancements, defense spending, and the capacity for global operations. For instance, it might sound like a very stupid example, but it's actually a really good one. Russia currently is struggling to get air dominance and air control over the Ukraine. Even though allegedly being like supposedly way more powerful in terms of air power than the Ukraine. Meanwhile, when the United States was going to war with Iraq or Vietnam or Afghanistan, they almost immediately had full air superiority. And even though aircraft of the United States were down in all of those various wars, not in any significant numbers if you compare it to the Russia-Ukraine situation going on. So you might have an airplane going down because some American made some mistake somewhere. Whereas the Russians are really losing kind of everything they have, sort of, not really hand over fist, but they're losing more significant numbers than the United States did, let's say, throughout the course of the entirety of the Iraq and the Afghanistan wars. Especially the Iraq war, back then the United States had such a huge, overwhelming amount of air power. I believe it was able to fully suppress the entire Iraqi air defense system using various SAD systems, suppression of enemy air defense systems. And from pretty much day one, the United States had this huge advantage. And Russia, which borders Ukraine, is having trouble pulling off the same thing that the United States was able to pull off for a country that's all the way on the other side of the world. Granted, obviously, the United States and various allies. But still, the United States had to fight a war essentially on the other side of the world with a big ocean in between of them. And the Russians have nothing in between of them and the Ukraine, and they're having all these problems. It's crazy to me that people think you can compare the American military might with the Russian one. Russia, in terms of military power, it more or less, it's kind of equally powerful to a country like Spain or Germany. It shouldn't really be compared with the United States. I feel China is in the running. I don't know why we even say Russia's number 2 militarily speaking, because they have a lot of nukes that they will never use. So, yeah, I don't think so. China is definitely the second most powerful country in terms of military on the planet. I think Russia should be 3, but whatever. We'll leave that up to the future, let's say. So aircraft inventory, size, and diversity. So this is really the thing that I was talking about a little bit before. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into it. But just by this, you can really get a grip of the difference between the United States Air Force and the Russian Air Force. So the United States Air Force, along with the Navy and the Marine Corps aviation branches, operate a vast and diverse fleet of aircraft as of recent data. So total aircraft, the United States military operates over 13,000 aircraft across all branches, making it the largest air force in the world. This includes a mix of fighters, bombers, transport aircraft, tankers, surveillance aircraft, and helicopters. Fighter aircraft. The U.S. maintains around 2,400 fighter jets, including the most advanced stealth fighters like the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II. Bomber fleet. The United States bomber fleet includes 66 B-52 Stratofortress, 20 B-2 Spirits, and the newly introduced B-21 Raider, which are outmatched in their ability to deliver both conventional and nuclear payloads over long distances. Transport and tanker aircraft. The U.S. also field a significant number of transporting aircraft, such as C-17 Globemasters and C-130 Hercules, and aerial refueling tankers like the KC-135 and KC-46, enabling global reach. So yeah. And then we have Russian air power. So total aircraft of the Russian Air Forces operates around 4,000 aircraft, which is less than a third of the U.S. inventory. Fighter aircraft. Russia approximately has 1,500 fighter jets, including the Su-27, the Su-30, and the Su-35, and the newer Su-57. But these numbers are still significantly lower than the US. If you actually break them down individually and you look at modern aircraft, Russia is largely operating a lot of older aircraft like the Su-27s, gave them modernization packages. But still, these older airframes are nothing in comparison to what the United States is bringing to the table in terms of modern sixth, seventh, and even to a lesser extent, fifth generation fighters. It's really nuts when you put the stats next to each other. Bomber fleet. Russia's bomber fleet is smaller and includes aircraft like the Tu-160, Tu-95, and the Tu-22M, which are older and fewer in number compared to the US. So the Russians are largely operating still regular turbofan and propeller bomber planes. So yeah, think about that what you will. United States using B-2, like pretty much invisible on radar, very modern bombers, can go anywhere in the world. Russian bombers, trouble flying past England. Let's just leave it at that. Like they can go over to the North Pole. I'm not stupid, which is way shorter. So they can still reach the US, but still. They're going to be much slower, much more easier to intercept and all that. Whereas you can get a B-2 Spirit above Russia and drop a nuke before the Russians are even aware you're there. All right. Technological superiority. So the technological edge of the U.S. air power is another critical factor that sets it apart from Russia. Stealth technology. The United States leads in stealth technology with the operational development and deployment of the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, both of which are fifth-generation fighters with advanced stealth capabilities. The F-35 in particular is a multi-role fighter that is in service with the U.S. and many allied nations, with over 965 units built as of now. Russia's Su-57 is its only operational fifth-generation fighter with fewer than 24 units built. So look at that difference. So if Russia would throw its entire Su-57 fleet at NATO, like we only need to send maybe 50. And then Russia is already defeated in terms of most modern aircraft. And then we have another 900 aircraft left to spare to send after the Russians. Like, even if by some miracle, let's say all of these Su-57 pilots are having the best day of their life, even if by some miracle they manage to kill all 50 that get sent after them, boom, another 900. Can just pull up like that, boom, gone is the Russian Air Force in essence, because the F-35, like, the Russians might as well be using paper airplanes. That's a good-ass airplane. Don't listen to the naysayers. The evidence is all there. Like, fucking just Google how good that thing is. Or just look at any United States Air Force videos or one of their presentations. It's nuts. Avionics and sensors. The United States aircraft are equipped with state-of-the-art avionics, radar systems, and sensors, such as the AN/APG-77 radar on the F-22, the AN/APG-81 on the F-35, which offer superior situational awareness and targeting capabilities. Russian aircraft, while advanced, generally lag behind in avionics and sensor fusion technology, making their fighters less capable in network warfare. This is true, but also if you see any videos about American pilots flying in Soviet planes, because they're not that hard to get a hold of, because a lot of former Soviet states have actually joined NATO. So NATO and the United States, by extent, has had access to Russian aircraft for a long time. And the thing that never makes, that frustrates them the most, if you watch any videos on Russian aircraft, is, what's the word? It's the layout of the controls and everything. Like the fucking hell. There's a word for it. I'm blanking. The ergonomics. That's the word. The ergonomics of Russian planes generally make no sense. Like, obviously, that it makes no sense does not mean that they cannot fly and do their roles really or reasonably effectively, at least. But it requires a bit more training, which is ironic because American pilots get trained way more than Russians. But I'll save that for another video, maybe. Electronic warfare capabilities. The U.S. has invested has invested heavily in electronic warfare with platforms like the EA-18G Growler, providing unmatched electronic warfare capabilities that can suppress many enemy air defenses, and disrupt communications. Russia has EW capabilities as well, but they're not as integrated or advanced as those of the US. That brings me back to my earlier point about the US invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, the United States really didn't need to do much fighting with the Iraqi Air Force because they could just endlessly suppress all of their equipment, which, I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but if you can prevent the enemy from turning on their radar, or at least if they turn it on, like if you can prevent them from seeing you, you can have the Iraqi Air Force think like, oh, the Americans are not here, and then you stay on the ground, and then they can just fly when the airplanes are still on the ground at their most vulnerable, take out scores of them, which is essentially what happened, and which is exactly what, literally exactly what Russia failed to do during the Ukraine war, which is why so many of their airframes were left operational at the start of the war and still are. And that's even discounting all the modern anti-air equipment Ukrainians have received from the West. So defense spending and research and development. This is probably one of my most favorite things to talk about. It's also one of the most significant ones, because you can think largely about conflicts as who's the richer dude. Because in terms of conflicts, the richer dude almost always wins, almost always has won, ever since the beginning of time. Like in the Iron Age, if you have 10 swords and the enemy has one stone axe, you win. And you can scale that up. If you have 100 swords and the enemy has 1,000, you're done for. And it works the same way with money, because money is the thing that allows you to buy a lot of weapons. All right, so let's get into it. Defense budget. The United States has the largest defense budget in the world. With annual spending exceeding $800 billion. A significant portion of this budget is allocated to the development, procurement, and maintenance of advanced air power. This level of funding allows the U.S. to sustain large numbers of modern aircraft, invest in cutting-edge research, and maintain a high level of readiness. Research and development. The U.S. leads in aerospace research and development, driven by both government agencies like DARPA and the private sector companies such as Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. Let's not forget SpaceX as well. These efforts have led to the development of next generation aircraft like the B-21 Raider, advanced unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and future vertical lift platforms. Russian spending. Russia's defense budget is around $65 billion. A fraction of the U.S. budget. While Russia prioritizes its air force within its budget, it lacks the financial resources to match the U.S. in terms of scale or technological advancements. Many of Russia's aircraft are modernized versions of Soviet-era designs, and while effective, they do not match the technological sophistication of the latest U.S. aircraft. So like I said before, Russian aircraft often tend to be older, less advanced, and upgraded Soviet-era designs, which generally means that the United States has a significant edge in air power, no matter what category you put them in. Global reach and power projection. So global military presence. The United States maintains a network of military bases around the world, enabling rapid deployment of air power to any region. The U.S. Air Force operates from bases in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, the Pacific, allowing it to project power globally. Aircraft aviation. The U.S. Navy operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, each carrying around 60 to 70 aircraft. So a single one of these aircraft carrier probably carries more modern airplanes than the entire Russian Navy does, and they have 11 of them, including the F-A-18 Super Hornets and the F-35 Lightning C. These carriers give the U.S. unparalleled ability to project air power anywhere in the world. Russia has one aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, which is conventionally powered and carries fewer aircraft, limiting its potential reach. Also, the Admiral Kuznetsov is old and rusty, whereas most American aircraft carriers are new and they have like a variety of them. 11 isn't actually the number of total aircraft carrier the United States operates. I think it operates way more, like 19 or even 21. It's just that these are the most modern, newest ones. I forgot which one it was. I think it's the Gerald Ford class, but I'm probably wrong. Some idiot can correct me on that or not. Yeah, up to you, really. Aerial refueling. The U.S. Fleet of aerial refueling tankers, as the KC-135 Stratotanker and the KC-46 Pegasus, greatly extends the range and endurance of its aircraft, allowing for sustained operations far from home bases. Russia has a much smaller and older fleet of tankers, limiting its ability to conduct long-range operations. This is the thing about I talked about before. This is the reason why the United States has had no problem invading Iraq, and Russia is having a lot of problems just dealing with Ukraine because they simply do not have the same aerial capabilities the United States does. Training and operational experience. So pilot training. U.S. pilots undergo extensive and continuous training, often in joint exercises with NATO and other allied forces. The U.S. invests heavily in flight hour simulation training and real-world operational experience. This level of training ensures that U.S. pilots are among the best prepared in the world. Combat experience. The U.S. has extensive combat experience from conflicts in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and other regions over the past few decades. This experience has refined U.S. tactics, techniques, and procedures, giving American air forces a practical edge in real-world scenarios. Russian training. While Russian pilots are well trained, they have fewer opportunities for joint exercises with other advanced air forces and less real-world combat experience to their American counterpart. All true. And the amount of different nations that the United States has been able to train with. And the funny thing is, those nations include nations that operate Russian aircraft. So the Americans have been able to train extensively at things like intercepting Russian produced fighter jets, being able to target and destroy them. Whereas the Russians have had nearly as much experience because it's much harder for them to get modern American military equipment to train with. So in conclusion, American air power is far superior to that of Russia in terms of size, technological sophistication, global reach, operational capability. The vast and diverse fleet of modern aircraft, coupled with unmatched defense spending, technological advancements, and global presence, ensures that the United States maintains a dominant position in the skies. While Russia remains a formidable force, it simply cannot compete with the scale and modernity of American air power. All right, that was my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, I'll see you next time.